Hi everyone, welcome to another exciting edition of Words, Images, and Worlds. Always excited to talk about telling stories across media, from film to television to comics and everything in between and beyond. And on this episode, I'm delighted to be talking with creator, producer Sandy King Carpenter. May I call you Sandy? Is that okay?
Sure. Yeah. That or
All
Your
right, sounds
Highness,
great.
either one works.
We will go with Your Highness. I like it. I like it.
No.
Well, you, of course, work with someone that folks out there know from the world of horror films and science fiction, and that is John Carpenter. And so I'm curious about what you would like listeners to know about the work and ideas of this person.
Well, I think he's always been ahead of his time, and he's always um, set the templates for where the horror and science fiction genres have gone for um, decades.
Mhm,
And
mhm,
so sometimes he took the hits for people that weren't ready to evolve, and sometimes he showed the way for us to examine our society and ourselves in a way that once people caught on, they had some real aha moments. And
mhm,
so that's why it's always been challenging and exciting for me to work with him. It's not just a matter of being convenient since we're I should say close to each other, but
mhm,
it's always interesting. It's always been interesting throughout my film career to be able to be inside the director's head and see where they really mean to go. And
yeah.
you open up new vistas for yourself as a crew or production person to implement those visions of the person you're working for and with. So for me, finding from the beginning, finding where John wanted to go and
Mhm.
helping facilitate that was an exciting proposition, and it continues to be to this day.
Lovely, lovely. And I know that Storm King Productions, I mentioned comics at the beginning. You've reached into the world of comics, but curious about what you would want listeners to know about that continuing and expanding vision and legacy and storyline.
I think that what Storm King Comics does is if you're a fan of what we do filmically and in television, the odds are pretty good you'll like the comic lines because we're able to push that envelope further. We don't have to worry about them being commercial. We don't have to worry about them having an opening weekend. We're able to
Hmm.
tell stories that appeal to us and bring in other writers and artists who have great visions of those two genres. And at the same time, we're also able to write things we think are either fun or help bring back other eras of horror or push to further boundaries in current culture.
Yeah. Yeah. And, curious about, you mentioned horror and science fiction. Do you see those as genres that link together? Are there connections there?
Well, to oversimplify, I've always seen science fiction as kind of, there's kind of hardware science fiction of lots of spaceships and things in outer space that, are essentially and again, I'm oversimplifying from my point of view, but like westerns in outer space that have a lot of metal in them
Hmm.
and lost in space kind of things. And then there's this stuff that I find more interesting, which is thing style science fiction. and event horizon kind of science fiction,
Mm-hmm.
and in general, kind of mindfuck science fiction, um, which is what the stuff we explore more in our comic books.
Yeah.
And
Humans in space and the organic material and the body. Yeah.
yeah, and so our science fiction is definitely more horror science fiction, because that's what we do, and that's what tends to come into us, and that's when a writer calls me up and says, well, what about this? And I think, cool.
Yeah.
That sounds neat. I mean, basically, the criteria for the comic books is if we think it's cool, that's what we put out. I mean, there's nobody else we have to answer to, just ourselves. And if somebody
Mhm.
doesn't like it, great. What are you going to do? Walk away. Um, but for the most part, I think that we know ourselves and we know our audience, and I think that um, the writers who are drawn to us have some really interesting stories to tell.
Yeah.
And, you know, might as well have a good time. We have enough brain damage when we go to do movies.
Well said. Well said. And I love the criteria of we think it's cool. That's a great criteria. Absolutely.
Yeah,
Yeah. If it
I
works, it works.
yeah, and you know, who are better arbiters of taste in our genres than John and I think. You
Hmm.
know, maybe if Chris Nolan were a comic book reader, it'd be great to hear what he thinks. You know, um,
True.
there's certain other people I love to hear they're reading our comics. And you're just gonna go, really nice. Um,
Yeah.
and it's great that I think we have a pretty loyal fan base who are repeat buyers. Who, if it says Storm King on it, they have it in their pull list, and that's good enough for me.
Absolutely. How has your background in film carried over to comics? Has it informed that process?
Well, it's a combination of all of the things I've done in my background because I started out as an artist, and I was my first jobs in film were in animation, and there were a lot of similarities in how a comic book comes together and how old school animation used to come together back in the dark ages when I started.
Mhm.
And it helped me understand the process more when we decided to go into comic books. Um, and I think everything you do in life, you bring life experience to anything you decide to step into.
Yeah.
And I think that every door I walked through fortunately led to other doors. I didn't have a master plan. That's not who I am. I just kind of go, huh, what's in here? Oh, that's cool. And usually it's worked out rather well. But I am not this master planner that says you need to know what you want and go after it. No, I fall through things and land in something interesting.
Graceful falling. Graceful falling.
Oh, I wish it were graceful.
Oh, well, I think I have one more official question that's on the list, and that is, of course, places where people can go. I know that John does shows like GalaxyCon and things like that, but if folks are looking for the comics and other material, any place that they should be looking for those and learning more?
Well, right now there's an interesting upheaval going on in the comics industry where Diamond, the biggest distributor of comics, just declared bankruptcy.
Hmm.
So all the rats, myself included, are bailing and finding new distributors. And right now we've just made a deal with SCB a smaller company, but in fact, I think more well suited to our audience and needs, and that they're largely a book distributor. And so they're going to be able to find us at all the regular comic shops, and hopefully a little better represented at places like Amazon, Books A Million, and Barnes and Noble, those kinds of places where we've been a little underrepresented on those shelves. And we're doing fewer conventions this year while we were trying to figure out what was going to be happening and where we could successfully take new product to. We're going to be at Texas Frightmare Weekend
Hmm.
and Midsummer Scream in Long Beach, and we'll be, in terms of our regular haunts, we'll be back at New York Comic Con. I'm going to bail on San Diego Comic Con because they keep upping their prices and I don't think, serving us particularly well.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
it's hugely expensive to do conventions, and I'd rather feel like everybody was pretty excited to greet the fans and show them a good time. And it started to get dicier. So I
Ah,
think
yeah.
we'll bow out, and we're substituting Summer Scream instead. And we're gonna try a few different things that way. They can check in on us at stormkingcomics.com to find our schedule. And John is he's going to GalaxyCon in Richmond. On April 3rd, John is going to be given a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame.
Very exciting. Very
Which is
exciting.
really nice. Yeah. So there's a lot of good things happening, and our our output of comics is going to be reduced a touch this year while we try and make sure that we're hitting the deadlines that get announced, and then we'll have more back up and running now that we're trying to figure out where the tariffs are happening in terms of our printing gets done in Canada. And so
Mm.
far, the Canadians have been very cool, but we want to make sure that we can come in on schedules, printed well, everybody gets what they expect to get.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
so it's really just um, new procedures
Hmm.
rather
It
than
makes sense.
nothing's coming to an end. We're just taking it a little slower. And then in October, we will have our anthology, Tales for a Halloween Night, out on time, and it'll be out in time for New York Comic Con.
Awesome. Awesome. Any other, not to put you on the spot, but any other titles that you know that you would want people to be looking out for?
Yeah, we've got Death Mask 2 and Blood of the Taken 2,
Hmm.
two titles that have been popular with people. This is an interesting one. We partnered up with the George Romero Foundation, GARF, on
Hmm.
a comic that's based on the amusement park, a film of George Romero's. And so we have a comic coming out that's with them. And it's really beautiful. It's the story from his movie, and the art is beautiful. And I think people
Cool.
that are George and John fans will get a kick out of that. And that'll be out in May.
Anything that we've missed that you want to make sure to share before we close out the interview?
Well, it looks like we have a series coming up for AMC called Dead 11, but that has to go through a couple more hoops with the network. And everybody think good thoughts. It's a fun
Hmm.
one. Horror,
Absolutely.
horror and suspense, but a
Yeah.
surprise. And that's about it.
Yeah, for folks out there that are horror fans and comics fans and science fiction fans, if folks don't know about Storm King Comics, I mean, absolutely a wonderful place to go, and I'll be sure to include the link when I post this.
Thank you so much.